I'll repeat.
Repeat. All right, we'll do it again. There we go. Good job. That was almost the same tone. All right. It was in the days of King Xerxes, who reigned from India to Ethiopia, over 127 provinces. That's a lot. In those days, he sat on the royal throne in the citadel, which is the capital called Susa, which that was the capital of the Persian Empire. In the 3rd year of his reign, he held a banquet for all the officials, the attendants, the army officers, and all the nobles in his presence. And he displayed his riches and glorious kingdom and splendor for 180 days. 6 months. Now that's a party. So all his officials, he partied with them for 6 months. Then after that came my party. When those days were completed, the king held another banquet for all the people in the capital, from the greatest to the smallest, and it was a 7-day feast. In the courtyard of the garden, and there were curtains of white draperies and violet and linen and cords and purple and silver rings and marble columns. It was just wow. Nothing you could say but wow. All the cups they were drinking from were gold, and none of them were the same. And the royal wine was plentiful. We're not doing that here. In accordance with the generosity of the king. I know, boo! So during that time, his queen, called Vashti, also held a separate banquet for the women in the palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, the last day, when the king's heart was full of joy with wine, you know what that means, he commanded his 7 officials to summon Queen Vashti to come before him, wearing the royal crown. Where's the royal crown? Royal crown. Wearing the royal crown. There we go. To display her beauty before the people, for she was lovely to see. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, and it was delivered by the eunuch, so the king became very, very angry. Then he spoke to all the wise men and his counselors, which was the custom with the law of legal matters. And they were very close to him, and he said, "What shall we do in accordance to the law, because Queen Vashti did not obey the command of the king?" And they answered in his presence and said, "Well, we have a problem here." That was my added there. Vashti the queen has not only wronged the king, but also the officials and the people in all the provinces, because her conduct will become known among all the women, causing them to look on their husbands with contempt and disrespect. Since they will say, "Well, King Xerxes commanded the queen to be brought, and she did not come." Therefore the ladies of Persia and Media, who have heard the queen's refusal, will speak in the same way to all the king's officials, and they have contempt and anger. So, if it pleases the king, let the royal command be issued to him, let it be written in all the laws that cannot be repealed or modified, that Vashti the queen will no longer come before the king. And let the king give her royal position to another one that is better and more worthy than she is. So, the king's decree was proclaimed. All the women and her husbands, from the greatest to the smallest, now everything is cool. So, what King Xerxes did was says, "Queen, you're fired." So, she's gone. Oh, and it's important to notice that when the king gives a law, it cannot be revoked. It cannot be broken. That's important later on. Okay, back to our story. The statement advised that the kings and officials, and the king did what they proposed. They sent letters out, and guess what? They sent it all to all the provinces, saying that every man should be the master and rule his own home, and he should speak in the household the language of his own people. Then here comes the good part. After this, the wrath of the king Xerxes subsided, and he remembered Vashti the queen, and what she had done, and that decree was against her. Then the king's attendants said, "You know what? Let beautiful women be sought for the king. Let the king appoint in all the provinces, have them gather all the beautiful women to the capital Susa, under custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. And let them be prepared, and let them have beauty, and let the young men that please the king be chosen to be queen for you." This pleased the king, and he did accordingly. Well, heck yeah, who wouldn't?
Exactly.
And let's think about this. I'm going to pause here. We have a Miss America pageant, right? And we have 50 states, right? He had 127 provinces. So if we only have 50 choices for Miss America, he had 127. That's a king. All right, go on, I'm sorry. Okay. So there was a certain Jew in the capital whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. So Mordecai was from the tribe of Benjamin, who had been deported from Jerusalem and exiled through Jeconiah, the king of Judah. So what Mordecai did was, when Nebuchadnezzar took over, he brought all of them to Babylon, and here he is. Okay. He was the guardian of Hadassah, which is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no mother or no father. The young woman was so beautiful in form and face, when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it came about, when the king's commanded decree proclaimed that all the beautiful women were brought to the citadel, the Susa, the capital, and put in the command of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace and placed in custody of Haggai, who was in charge of all the women. Now the young women pleased Haggai and found favor with him, so he quickly provided to her beauty preparations, food, gave her 7 choices of maids, and transferred her to the maids to the best place in the harem. But Esther did not reveal her Jewish background of her people or her family, for Mordecai instructed her not to do so. Every day Mordecai, who was an attendant in the king's court, walked back and forth to the courtyard to learn how Esther was doing. Now, when it was each woman's turn to go before the king Xerxes, after the end of the 12 months of regulations for the women, for the days of beautification were completed, 6 months of oil and myrrh, 6 months of sweet spices and perfumes. Man, that almost sounds like my wife. That was the beauty preparation for the women. Then the young woman would go before the king, and anything she wanted was given to her, and she would take from the harem and to the king's. And in the evening she would go in the next morning and return to the second and the custody of Shagaz, and the king's eunuch who was in charge of all the other women. She would not return to the king unless he summoned her or called her by name. That's very important. In this day, you never went before the king unless he called you. Because if you tried to go before the king and he hadn't called you, yeah. Now as for Esther, yay! the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her in his own daughter, when he came to go into the king, she requested nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch attendant who was in charge of the woman, advised her. Esther found favor in the sight of all who saw her. That means she was wow, wow. So Esther was taken to the king Xerxes to his royal palace in the 10th month, that is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And I'm scrolling, fast forward. Now the king loved Esther more than all the other women. So she was so beautiful, she was the most beautiful out of all the 127 provinces. She was a wow, wow, wow.
Inside and out. Inside and out.
Yes, inside and out. And she found favor and kindness with him more than any of the rest. So he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen in place of Vashti. Then the king held a great banquet for all his officials and servants and made a festival and gave gifts in accordance to all the resources of the king. So here we go. Then all the women gathered around the second time, and Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther did not reveal her family or the people she was, her Jewish background, just as Mordecai told her, for Esther did what Mordecai told her, just as when she was under his care. And in those days, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, and there was two guys named Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the door. They became angry at the king and conspired to attack the king and kill him. But the plot became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther. Esther told the king what Mordecai told her in Mordecai's name. Now when the plot was investigated and found to be true, both men were hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of Chronicles in the king's presence. Remember that, because that will come important later on in the story. All right, ready? After these things, King Xerxes promoted the son of Hammedatha the Agite, and advanced him and established his authority over all officials. So in other words, this guy was second in command. You had King Xerxes and then him. All right, and he ordered everyone to bow down and honor him and pay homage to... For this is what he commanded them to do. But Mordecai, a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin, neither bowed down nor paid homage to him. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why are you disregarding the king's direct command?" Now it happened when they had spoken to him day after day, Mordecai would not listen, because that they told to see whether Mordecai's reason for his behavior was valid, for he had told them that he was a Jew. Okay, so when saw that Mordecai would neither bow down nor pay homage to him, it made him so mad he was furious. But he did not lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him who the people of Mordecai were. They told him that Mordecai was a Jew. So, determined and set out to destroy all of the Jews, the people of Mordecai who lived throughout all the kingdom of Xerxes. So in the first month, the month of Nisan, that's March, April, in the 12th year of King Xerxes, cast Pur, and here's where we get the name. He cast Pur, that is Lot, cast before him day after day to find a lucky day to approach the king month after month until the 12th month, the month of Adar. So what he did was he kind of cast lots to come up for a day to kill all the Jews. And that was called Pur. And when you put an I-M at the end, it's plural, Purim, which means he did it more than once. So he was kind of cards or pick a straw or whatever to pick a day to kill all the Jews. Okay, so then said the king Xerxes, there are certain people scattered among you in all your provinces and kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all the other people. They do not observe the king's laws. Therefore, it is not in the king's interest to tolerate them or stay here. So, if it pleases the king, right, let it be decreed that they shall be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry out the king's business to put into the king's treasuries. Then the king removed his signet ring and put it in his hand, which is the ring to seal the letters, and he gave it to the son of the Haggai, who was the enemy of the Jews. So the king said to this silver is given to you, and the people also to do as you please. Oh. Not yet, you missed it. Coming up though. Then all the king's scribes and secretaries summoned on the 13th day of the first month. It is written just as commanded. And he sent it to all the governors and all the provinces and all the people, and according to their language and according to their right, each people according to their language being written. That letters were sent by the couriers to all the provinces to destroy and kill and annihilate all the Jews, both young, old, women, children, in that one day. The 13th day of the 12th month, which is the day of Adar. The 14th day of Adar, you see right there. And seize all their belongings as plunder. So a copy of all this went to every province. The couriers went out immediately and issued in the capital. And while the king and sat down to drink in the capital, was perplexed. The king was perplexed at the alarming decree. Now when Mordecai learned of everything that had been done, he tore his clothes in mourning and put sackcloth on and ashes, went into the center of the city and cried and cried and cried. He went only as far as the king's gate because no one was to enter the king's gate dressed in sackcloth. In each and every province the decree was reached. There was great mourning and crying among the Jews, fasting, weeping, wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes, because they all learned that on this day they were all going to be killed. When Esther's maids came to her and told her what had happened, the queen was seized and overcome with fear. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai, that he would remove his sackcloth, but he did not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom the king appointed to attend her, ordered him to go to Mordecai and find out what this issue was and what this decree was and how it came about. So he went to Mordecai in the open square, and Mordecai told him everything that had happened and in the exact amount of money that had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the decree that was issued in the capital for the Jews' destruction, to show Esther and explain to her the order that the king and had to seek his favor and plead with him for the lives of her people. So Mordecai was asking Esther to go to the king and plead to save the Jews. So he came back and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke and ordered him to reply to Mordecai, saying, all the king's servants and people in the king's provinces know that for any woman that comes to the king in the inner court without being called, he has but one law, and that is to be put to death. So unless the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. And as for me, I have not been summoned to come into the king for at least 30 days. So they told Mordecai what Esther had said. What she's saying is, in order to go to the king, he has to call you. If you try and go to the king without being called, if he accepts you, he'll hold out his gold scepter and everything's fine. If he doesn't, you're done. And that's what she's saying. Hey, the king didn't call me, and if I go before him and he doesn't hold out his scepter, I'm gone. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews that are present in the capital of Susa and observe a fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days or 3 nights, and me and my maids will do the same. Then I will go in and see the king without being called, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and did what Esther told. So she was taking a huge risk. On the 3rd day after the fast, Esther put on her royal robes, stood in the inner court of the king's palace opposite his throne room. The king was sitting on his royal throne, facing the main entrance. When the king saw Esther, the queen in the court, she found favor in his sight. And the king extended her the golden scepter which is in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the top of the scepter, and the king said, what is troubling you, Queen Esther? What is your request? And it shall be given unto you up to half the kingdom. Esther said, if it pleases the king, may the king and come this day to the banquet that's prepared. Then the king said, bring quickly, so that we may do as Esther says. So the king and came to the banquet which Esther prepared. They drank wine at the banquet, and the king said to Esther, what is your petition, and it shall be granted to you? What is your request? Even up to half of the kingdom. Then Esther said, my petition is this. If I have found favor in your sight, if it pleases the king, I request that the king and come to a banquet which I will prepare for them tomorrow and do the same thing, and then I will make my request. Okay? Then went away that day joyful and in good spirits. But when Mordecai the king was at the king's gate refusing to stand up and bow down before him, he was filled with rage toward Mordecai. Nevertheless, controlled himself and went home. There he sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then told him the story and recounted of all his riches and glory, the large number of officials and how he became second in command over all. And then said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come to the king's banquet that she has prepared tomorrow. So I'm invited with the king. Yet all of this does not satisfy me as long as I see Mordecai, that Jew, sitting at the king's dock, not bowing down before me. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai hung on those gallows, then go joyfully to the banquet with the king." And the advice pleased, and he had the gallows made. Dun, dun, dun. On that night, the king could not sleep. So he ordered that the book of records and memorable deeds of the Chronicles be brought, and they read before the king. And it was found there how Mordecai had reported and to Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who had planned to kill him. And the king said, "What honor or distinction has been given to Mordecai for this?" So do you remember when they plotted to kill, and Mordecai reported to Esther, and he said, "Well, how did we reward Mordecai?" And he said, "We didn't. Nothing has been done for him." So the king said, "Who is in the court here?" Now, had just entered the court in the king's palace to ask the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows, which he had prepared for him. The king's servants said to him, "Look, is standing out in the court." And the king said, "Let him come in." So came in, and the king said to him, "What is to be done for a man who desires honor?" Now, thought to himself, "Wow, who could the king be talking about other than me, to be desired and to be honored?" So said to the king, "For the man who the king desires to honor, let the royal robe be put on him and be worn. Put on the king's horse to be ridden, and put on his head the royal crown, and led throughout all the streets so everybody can pay honor to him. Let him dress in the man the king's delights, and on horseback go through the open square in the city." And the king said, "This is what shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor." Then the king said to, "Quickly, take the robe, take the horse, and do everything you said, and do this for Mordecai, the Jew who is sitting at the king's gate. Leave nothing out that you've said." Are you kidding me? So took the royal robe and the horse and dressed Mordecai and led him throughout the square, proclaiming to him, "This is what should be done for the man whom the king desires to honor." So time out. So you have the bad man, who we don't pronounce, who thought that he was going to get all this attention, which he didn't. And when the king said, "Do that to Mordecai," whoo, you see how mad that made him. Okay, because he wanted to ask the king for him to be hung. So Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but was hurried to his own house, mourning with his head covered in sorrow. Then told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise counselors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall in status, is of Jewish heritage, you will not overcome him, but will certainly fall before him." Dun, dun, dun. So while they were all speaking with him, the king's eunuchs attended and arrived hurriedly to bring to the banquet that Esther prepared. Now, here's where it gets really good. So the king and came to drink with Esther the queen. And the king said to Esther on the second day, "What is your petition? And it shall be granted unto you." Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and it pleases the king, let my life be spared, and my people's life be spared as my request. For we have been sold, and my people are to be destroyed, killed, wiped out of existence. If only we have been sold as slaves, men and women would remain silent, for our hardship would not be a sufficient burden." But, mentioning it, King Xerxes asked Esther, "Who is he and where is he who dares to do such a thing to my queen?" Esther said, "An adversary, an enemy. This evil man." Then became terrified before the king and the queen. Then in his fury and anger, the king stood up from drinking wine, went out to the palace garden to decide what he should do, and stayed behind and pled for his life to the queen, for he saw that harm had been determined against him by the king. When the king returned to the garden place from where he'd been drinking, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. Oh my gosh. So he's already mad at him, and now he's on the couch with the queen. Okay. That's what, here we go. I didn't make that part up. It's in there. Okay. And the king said, "Will even attempt to assault the queen with me in the palace?" As the king spoke these words, the servant covered face in preparation for the execution. Time out. So this is where we get, this is where they get the custom to cover our faces with masks and stuff, because here the bad man, the evil man, they covered his face and they covered him up so nobody would see him. So that's where that came from. Here you go. Okay, time back in. Then Harbonah, one of the eunuchs said, "Now look, there are gallows 50 cubits high standing at house, which he had built for Mordecai, who is in good standing with the king." And the king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. But on that day, King Xerxes gave the house of the enemy of the Jews to Queen Esther and Mordecai, because Esther had disclosed what he was to her. The king took off his signet ring and took it away from and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put Mordecai in charge of the house of... Alright, so what is happening? Everything that the bad man had, he was second in charge, was now given to Mordecai. Alright, so Esther spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet, and cried and cried and cried and implored to try and avoid the evil plot of and his plan that he had devised against the Jews, because the decree to annihilate the Jews was still in effect. Then the king held out to Esther the golden scepter. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and she said, "If it pleases the king, and I found favor before you in this matter, if it is proper and is pleasing in your sight, let it be written to revoke the order by the Agagite, which he wrote in the order to destroy all the Jews. For how can I endure the tragedy that will happen to my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? King Xerxes said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, behold, I've given Esther the house of, and he has been hung on the gallows because also concerning the Jews, write as you see fit. In the king's name, seal it with the signet ring. For a decree which is written in the king's name is sealed with the king's signet ring and may not be revoked. So he's saying, King Xerxes saying, hey, even though the bad man made this, I can't go against it. But, watch this. All the king's scribes were gathered together. On the 23rd day, it was written in accordance with everything Mordecai has commanded. And all the governors, he wrote a decree in the name of King Xerxes, sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters to all the couriers on horseback. In it, the king granted the Jews who were in every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy and kill and annihilate anyone that tried to harm them or attack them, their children, their women, and take their enemies' goods as plunder. So what the king said to go against that decree, he said, okay, I'm making a law that you have the right to defend yourself and kill anyone that's trying to kill you. Alright, so that's what happened. He sent it to all the provinces. Alright, then Mordecai departed from the presence of the king in the royal apparel of blue and white, with a large gold crown and a robe of fine linen purple. And everybody rejoiced and shouted, because now there's a dawn of a new hope, of gladness and joy and honor in each and every province, in each and every city where the king's command and decree arrived. The Jews celebrated with gladness and joy, and a feast as a holiday, and many of the peoples of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews of their God had fallen on them. So all these people that weren't Jews became Jews because they didn't want to die. Because they heard what God was fixing to do. So here's where it becomes good. On this day, when the king's command and the edict was about to be performed, the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain power over them and slaughter them, it happened the other way around, so that the Jews themselves gained power over them who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities throughout the provinces, and King Xerxes apprehended those who wanted to do them harm. No one could stand before them, for the fear of them and the fear of God had fallen on all the people. Even all the officials in provinces and rulers and governors who attended the king's business supported the Jews in defeating the enemies, because fear of Mordecai and God had fallen on them. Isn't that wonderful? For Mordecai was great and respected the king's palace. His fame spread through all the provinces, and he became greater and greater. So the Jews struck all their enemies, killing and destroying all the ones that wanted to kill them. And at the capital in Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They killed the 10 sons of the Jews' enemy, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. On that day, the number of those who were killed in the capital was reported to the king. The king said to Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of in the capital. What then have they done for the rest of the provinces? What is your petition to be granted to you? What is your further request? And Esther said, if it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in the capital that tomorrow in accordance with the decree of today, that the dead bodies of 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. So the king commanded it be done, and they hanged the bodies of the 10 sons of... All right. The rest of the Jews were in the king. They assembled, they defended their lives, and saved themselves and ridded themselves of the enemies. They killed 75,000 of those who hated them. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. This was done at the 13th day of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews who were in Susa, the capital, assembled on the 13th day and the 14th day of the same month. On the 15th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and fasting. Therefore the Jews of the villages who live in the rural areas made the 14th day the holiday for rejoicing and feasting and sending the choice portions of food to another and the poor. Now Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the provinces, telling them to celebrate on the 14th day of Adar, that's the month, that the same should be done every year, because those days the Jews rid themselves of their enemies, and the month which has turned from grief to joy, and from mourning into a holiday, they should make these days of feasting and rejoicing, sending choice portions of food to the poor. So, the Jews undertook what they started to do, and what Mordecai had written to them, for was the son of the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews. He plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Purim, that is lots, to find the right time to destroy them. But when it came before the king, he commanded in writing that his wicked scheme which be devised against the Jews return on his own head, that he and his sons should endure the planned plot and be hanged on the gallows. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur, which means lots. And because of the instructions of this letter that they had faced in regard to what happened, the Jews established this day and made it a custom for themselves and their descendants and for all who joined them, so that they would not fail to celebrate these days as it is written and appointed every year. So these days will be remembered and celebrated to every generation, every family, every province, every city. Purim was not to cease from among the Jews, nor their memory fade from their descendants. So there's the story of Purim. Now it's time to have fun and dance and sing and celebrate. To get the kids ready, this is the fun part. Hold on. Hold on, this is the fun part.
You know how to bailar?
Okay.
I have not heard that. Hey, where is that? Is it from Honduras?
Purim time is upon us. We'll be singing some great tunes. Yes, everything's topsy-turvy.
All right, ready? You want to stand up, sing, dance? This is the time to do it.
I mean, we eat cookies filled with prune. Shake your brother right. Shake, shake, shake your brother. Shake it all in time. Work, work, work your brother. Work your brother right. Work, work, work your brother. Work it all in time. Well, there was a guy named Haman. He tried to kill off the Jews, but thankfully brave Esther saved us. She knew what to do with no time to lose. She jumped in the line, put her mask on, drank some. Okay, I release you. Jump in the line. everything will be fine.
I believe you.
Jump in the line, put your mask on, drink some
Okay,
more.
I believe you.
Jump in the line, everything will be
Okay, I
fine.
believe
As you shake, shake, shake your brother, shake your brother right. Shake, shake, shake your brother, shake it all in time. Work, work, work your brother, work your brother right. Work, work, work your brother, work it all in time. Everyone's dressed up in costumes, we march around in parades. 'Cause us Jews, if you give us lemons, we'll make a lemonade. Jump in the line, put your mask on, drink some
Okay,
wine.
I believe you.
Jump in the line, everything will be
Okay,
fine.
I believe you.
Jump in the line, put your mask on, drink some
Okay,
wine.
I believe you.
Jump in the line, everything will be
I
fine.
believe
As you shake, shake, shake your brother right. Shake, shake, shake your brother, shake it all in time. Work, work, work your brother right. Work, work, work your brother, work it all in time. The moral of this Megillah is stand up for what you feel. And if you try to kill us, we'll boo out your name and make a Purim spiel. Put your mask on, drink some
Okay, I believe you.
Jump in the line, everything will be fine.
Okay, I believe you.
Jump in the line, put your mask on, drink some
Okay, I believe you.
Jump in the line, everything will be fine.
Okay, I believe you.
Shake, shake, shake your brother. Shake your brother right. Work, work, work your brother. Work it all in time. Dance, dance, dance the horror. Dance it all in time. Work, work, work your brother. Work it all in time. Hey, jump in the line, put your mask on, drink some
Okay,
more.
I believe you.
Jump in the line, everything will be
Okay,
fine.
I believe you.
Jump in the line, put your mask on, drink some
Okay,
more.
I believe you.
Jump in the line, everything will be fine.
I believe
As you shake, shake, shake your brother right. Shake, shake, shake your brother, shake it all in time. Work, work, work your brother right. Work, work, work your brother, work it all in time.